gets a goal? Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to Who Got the Assist. It's year 9 of doing this. What the actual F? How did that even happen? Where did the time go? A special welcome to new listeners and new viewers trying us out. Hope you enjoy it and will, of course, stick with us for the year. We're here much refreshed after a long break and raring to go after an absolute avalanche of info from FPL starting last Friday, which led to the game being fully launched today. And, of course, we... by which I mean me, Tom, you're part of the furniture for the last 9 years, and my good friend Sam, aka Mr. FPL Pricey. How are you doing, mate? Did you have a good summer?
Yeah, I have, thanks. It feels like the summer's not really quite over yet, and we've got another 25 or so days before FPL launches. So although we'll be making content, we've still got a little bit left to enjoy, don't we? But yeah, all good so far. Been to a lot of cricket, actually. I've been to test matches at both Edgbaston and Lords.
Yeah, you mentioned.
Lords went a lot better than Edgbaston from an English point of view. But yeah, it's good to, have a look at other sports whilst FPL's on the back burner. What about you, Tom? How's your summer been?
Yeah, quite good. Kind of completely disconnected. Didn't watch a minute of the Club World Cup. Watched some of the Women's Euros, but not really thought about fantasy sports apart from Elite Serium, which is very. I don't watch it. I just kind of do it on vibes and kind of a few basic bits of numbers. So yeah, it's been really good just to kind of just take time away and I suppose like hopefully reaping the benefits now because we're back and kind of really raring to go, aren't we, this time?
Yeah, we're super up for it. We met up, a couple of weeks ago in London, and we were both already chomping at the bit, ready to go. So fingers crossed that bodes well for us this year. We both got low IDs, didn't we? So that may show just how keen we were to get cracking and get into the FPL app straight away. 172 for me, low 4 figures for you, 1511. So yeah, We really were keen, weren't we?
Yeah, except unfortunately my daughter decided to have a massive poo at 12:29. I'd been checking every half hour since the Haaland and prices went out. So I knew it'd be coming today after the white screen came out overnight. I was just like, oh no, I've got to change this. I can't leave her waddling around in that. And then yeah, literally as I kind of wash my hands, obviously, before I touch my phone, hygiene people. I saw your text and I refreshed it and I was like, oh no, and I had to get through and it was all right. I know there are a lot of people who kind of saw it like, they had problems logging in and stuff. But yeah, I'm happy with that. It's memorable, as you say. That's half the battle won, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. All I really want is an ID that I don't need to have a good memory to be able to type it into things like FPL Team and stuff like that. So yeah, I think we've done well to start off with. In the meantime, though, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, some hot takes. Obviously, the game's just launched. We've had a lot of different bits of news that have come out at us over the last few days. So we'll have a quick chat about all of those, the things that have jumped out at us from looking at the early price list. A deeper price pod is going to come next week, I believe. So just early thoughts for now, quick reactions, hot takes, all of that sort of stuff. Then, of course, we'll discuss and maybe debate the changes more specifically that FPL announced over the last weekend, including defensive contributions, which Tom wants to call defcons. I think that has gained quite a lot of popularity already amongst the analytic community. So that might catch on. Double chips and perhaps controversial AFCON transfer refresh, up to 5 transfers in game week 16, as well as bonus point changes as well. So bonus, the BPS rankings changes, not actual bonus points. Although technically, I guess that's kind of changed a little bit as well. Yeah. And of course, we will round off with our early first drafts because we can't do our first pod without that. So I think it should be a fun show. We've got loads of hot takes coming. So buckle up. It should be good fun, shouldn't it, Tom?
Yeah, don't quote us on it. We've literally just seen it as much as you guys have today. So yeah. But I mean, straight into it, Sam. Kind of first off, overall thoughts. What do you think from the first kind of few hours you've had with it before we get into kind of a few sort of nitty gritty initial sort of observations? Overall, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised with some of the pricing. I think obviously you look at the premiums first and you try and build backwards from that. So Salah and Haaland coming in at 14 and 14 and a half reverse that is, I think, smart pricing because it makes it almost impossible to have a good draft with both of them in. Yeah, I think it's also clever that they didn't reduce the prices of Palmer or Saka. They obviously threw Isak in at that price as well. So it's difficult to get everyone you want. And for the first time in a while, I did actually have to really think about my first draft. I messed around with it for quite a long time before thinking, okay, I quite like this balance. I think this all kind of works. It felt a little bit more challenging than maybe the last couple of seasons have been. Even last season was actually not too bad, but this feels like a step up in terms of the pricing and the way it's structured. There are going to be bargains, and we'll come on to that over the coming weeks. But the other thing that initially struck me is that there weren't too many obvious low hanging fruits in any position under certain price points. So under like 6.5 million in midfield and up front, it's actually quite hard to find players that are immediately jump off the page good value. Like, I'm sure they'll come to the fore over the coming weeks, but it's difficult to find those really good underrated like low price gems. And in defense, there's a surprising amount of 4.5s I do like, but obviously there not being any over 6 million, maybe it means that price pool is quite congested. And can you find 0.5, 1 million here or there to help boost your midfield or forward lines? It's going to be really interesting to try and get the balance right in terms of how we structure the funds in our 3 or 4 different positions.
Yeah, definitely. I really like it as well. Sarpin's at the wheel. Salah, Haaland, 28%, 28.5%, something like that of your budget, right, in one go. So I think that in itself creates sufficient challenge. There's a few maybe that kind of come into the team. It's not so much that they're underpriced, though. I think it's just that I think that these look like quite good picks for the initial sort of 4 or 5. And yeah, just a really few interesting decisions to be made, which are aided and abetted, I think, by the new changes to the game, which we'll get on to later on. But yeah, very happy and really raring to go this time. Not like kind of 2 or 3 years ago when the reveals kind of punched with optimism immediately, as it seemed like much of it wasn't thought through beyond 10 or 12 players, and you could have the super team from game week 1, whereas, as you said, this time you had to really think about it, and we'll continue to think about it. And I think that's kind of a bit of a dream, really, with kind of 25 days to go. It's probably not the best situation when you're kind of sat there just like, all right, this team's pretty obvious, I'm done. So lots of debates to be had, and I think that's kind of what the lifeblood of FPL is, especially in preseason, which can sometimes kind of drag on a little bit, especially if it is a bit more obvious. You mentioned kind of no defenders over 6. That's probably one of the first things that I kind of broke into, really, as in terms of like overall kind of observations of it. Really, I don't know. Maybe my thought on that, Sam, was just that maybe it's designed to encourage people to think about something other than the default 3-4-3. Lots of good options now, elevated, of course, by DEFCON, and also a point via my friend Matt, as I was talking about with him earlier on. The centre backs carrying that sort of full 90 promise over the wing backs or whatever, and Nathan Collins was the only outfielder to play every minute last year, for example, creates that sort of more chance for them to get DEFCON every week. So it definitely feels like it was sort of artificially capped at 6. So Gvardiol, for example, and Van Dijk, I thought they get 6.5 because of the DEFCON sort of thing coming in. But I wonder whether that's kind of forcing it and gamifying a little bit to make you think about defenders a little bit more, especially if you are sort of always a 3-4-3 ultra. If that makes sense. That's one thing that I noticed about that. We'll talk more on that later, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think the decision to be made between like the fullbacks and the centre backs for those premium teams is now a really interesting one. Like, do you go after the attacking returns or do you go with the solid 90-minute men? And you can't even argue that the price is what made me swing one way or the other, because they're the same price. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see which way the majority of the community go. But I think it will be a bit of a split. And some weeks it will punish, some weeks it will benefit. Be really interesting to see how that pans out. But yeah, shall we have a look at, the first graphic that we've got here is the position changes. Shall we summarize any that are standing out quickly?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few which kind of caught the eye. Cunha being made into midfielder, kind of, I don't know why, that had vibes of Aubameyang being made into midfielder a few years ago, if you remember that. Marmoush as well, Gakpo, and Mr. Ndai, and losing 4 strikers to midfield. I think the upshot of that, I mean, you've got Bowen coming in to the forward line, but the upshot of that is it makes the forwards feel pretty thin to me, Sam. I don't know about you. I mean, maybe we're kind of pricing in the fact that we've got Gyökeres, potentially an Ekitike coming in, which would pad out the ranks a bit. Solanke will talk about it later on, but really interesting to me. But I think that that's kind of been the big net effect of this in some ways, that it's kind of thin the ranks if thinking about just game in general. In terms of actual players, Marmoush, I think, was kind of the one that most people's eyes were drawn to, as well as Bowen. I think Bowen was in many people's squads with the in mind for people's squad to the Sunderland game first up. But Marmoush getting that midfielder, I think that could be something that could be potentially interesting next year if Haaland's injured or if he goes on a streak like we saw in the Bundesliga in the first half of last year, which is what caused City to, I think, go in for him. A player who can overperform to a massive extent. So yeah, midfield 8.5, that could be one which could potentially be quite yummy at some point during the season, depending on circumstance.
It's an interesting price point as well. There's a decision to be made between him, Wirtz, Ødegaard, Bruno, all of them within 0.5 of each other. It's a very interesting angle that they've played there. I would have probably kept him as a forward, honestly, given that he is the not the backup, but he would be playing centre forward if not for Haaland, and plays just off of Haaland anyway. So I think it's interesting they've done that. I think it's net good as well, because it gives you more of a debate as to whether or not you want to go after Haaland or maybe just have the money in Marmoush. Ndiaye as well will be a popular one. Really like him as a midfielder. I think that's fair considering the average heat map positions he was playing. And
left wing, wasn't he?
And again, you see so many left wingers that. Well, Salah at right wing is a classic example where, you could maybe put him as a striker, but it would kind of break the game. So, yeah, it kind of makes sense to put Ndiaye back to a midfielder. Bowen, I was a little bit surprised by, but I kind of welcome it. I think him at 8 million up front is, he probably would have been 50-60% owned if he was a midfielder at 8 million because of the first fixture and for the first little batch. Having him as a forward, he won't be in no teams, that's for sure, because he's still a good pick, but he has lost a little bit of appeal. I think a 4-4-2 is going to be more popular than it has been in recent seasons because there just aren't that many striker options.
Certainly.
And 4-5-1 as well. So basically, I think they've just added a little bit of power to the back line, taken a little bit away from the forward line, and the midfield is, as ever, probably your most powerful part of your squad to make the most gains out of. So yeah, I think it's all net pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing that I kind of see there and think, oh, I'm not sure about that. I did see a few sort of comments like, oh, I'm not sure about Bowen doing that, but I think he was playing centre forward quite a lot of the time. Maybe out of necessity because Füllkrug was always injured last year. But yeah, I didn't see any of those and think, oh, I'm not sure about that. I think all of them sort of do make sense. And we're not even mentioned Lewis Skelly and Lewis Potter, for example. Absolutely put them in defence because that's where they play. Cool. Right. There you go. Done and dusted. But what we did see really with FPL, the avalanche information I spoke about at the very top, is an absolute pile of new changes. We counted 5 in all, which were the defcons assist clarification rules, more chips, the AFCON transfers, which everyone was fine with as far as I'm aware. I don't think there's any debate about that one, and a few bonus points, bonus kind of things being swept up. Now I think we're going to probably keep back a lot of sort of the depth of analysis for defcons till next week. We'll give a little bit of a kind of overall view of them, and we're not going to kind of define each and every single one of these changes in absolute sort of massive detail, because I think quite a lot of people will already know, but we'll definitely give you what you need to know if you aren't kind of sure. But yeah, I mean, should we take them one by one maybe and just kind of give our thoughts and kind of where we are with them and everything like that?
Yeah, sure. So DEFCON, we've already kind of described it a little bit. Obviously, 2 extra points if you reach a certain barrier or a certain bar, for CBIT. So clearances, blocks, interceptions, tackles, add on recoveries for a midfielder.
C-Bit and C-Bert. That's what we're going to be. Yeah, you got to say it in a Bristolian accent, haven't you? C-Bert. But I feel like we're going to, it's going to annoy the purists, isn't it? But I think it's going to quickly become part of the vernacular, those ones, sadly.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the other thing to mention is you need 2 extra points of that to get the midfielder up the 2 points. So you need 12 on the C-Bert to get a midfielder or a forward. Those 2 extra points, 10 for a defender. With a defender, I think it's the majority what you're looking out for is clearances, because they're all ranked the same, but clearances are what really gets you over the line for a defender because they just get so many more clearances. So if you can find a defender who gets loads of clearances, chances are they're pretty good on this ranking. And with midfielders, if you can find a midfielder with a lot of recoveries, chances are they're pretty good on this ranking as well. So those are the 2 standout things that I spotted earlier on when you actually divide up the data and see where those extra little points are coming from. But it's net positive again. I think it generally brings in a lot of players that may not have been FPL options last season. There's a few who already were FPL options who become better. Looking at you, Bruno, but a lot of defenders that otherwise might have just been at slightly boring, steady Eddie picks, albeit 90-minute men, and some sort of box to box or CDM style midfielders are. No, I wouldn't say they're like the sexiest pick all of a sudden, but they're more relevant, and you can maybe play a more cautious strategy with one or two of them and just sort of churn out the points that it ain't much, but it's honest work meme would just come out weekly on that. And it's like 4 point here, 5 point here, 4 point, and it will get you to a good total across the season. Thoughts?
But what's really interesting about that, Sam, is something that I've kind of bringing those players in to FPL and just widening the cachet of interesting FPL players is what's really, really interesting to me here. Just because, I mean, it's something that I've been kind of calling for a long time. If you've been listening to this show for a long time. And I initially kind of thought, we do Dumfries bonus, something like that. You know, that they'd add this sort of thing into bonus and height and amp it up for defensive midfielders, something like that. And this is kind of a really good solution to add in a whole new metric. And I think it's just really cool because you end up with a really kind of interesting scenario where you have a player like Elliot Anderson, for example, who gets picked up in, if you watch on YouTube, there's a little chart that I've put up, which is basically the top 12 players based on the defensive contributions per start. In turn, and I've kind of worked out the kind of the possible extra points and tallied up. I've basically tallied up their C-bit or C-bert, divided that by their starts to get a per start defcon metric, extrapolated extra points, then round up the possible points totals and give the percentages as well. But it works a bit like saves. This, so a keeper may get a lot of saves, but not reach the 3-point threshold, free save threshold every week to get the extra point. So it's not kind of a clear science. But yeah, it kind of does bring to the fore players like Bruno, who does get kind of a bit of a bump if we do add in the defcons. Gets to over 200 for the year last year. All that kind of busy scampering around actually probably would be a bit of a net positive for a player like Bruno. Elliot Anderson as well, as I mentioned earlier on, like I think probably the defcon king in lots of different ways. Lots of defensive contributions per start. Really an awful lot. Probably the most kind of uplift you get with any player in terms of possible extra points in terms of the net value. And at 5.5, he's a really interesting example of that sort of player who's now brought into the conversation a little bit more. As you said, Sam, a player who could drip feed you, 4 points every week. Something like that. That is great value at 5.5, and he's got like a sort of 0.18 or something extra like per 90. So we're not talking about a player who's going to be kind of getting goals and assists every week, but a player like that, you're not paying too much for him. Of Belieber as well at 5 at Brighton, another example of that. These are players who are now in the conversation, never were before, who do have a valid case to be in a team, and it kind of means that you can make interesting decisions with the other players as well. So taking the emphasis, not completely, this isn't a game breaker, this isn't something which is completely sort of altered fundamentally what we're interested in FPL. It's still kind of weighted towards goals and assists, but this is just another extra little kind of part of the game that they've added on. It's not a game breaker, it's 2 points, it's capped throughout the course of the season of the possible output of being kind of 76 points, isn't it? Something like that, which is cumulatively, that could be quite a lot. So that can happen every week? Absolutely not. But it does mean that players are kind of in the conversation, and they are going to provide value more than they ever did before. So yeah, I think it's really, really, really interesting. The other thing that I'd mention very quickly is in terms of the kind of the premium defenders, Van Dijk does pretty well in terms of the underlying C-bit. I think he's 9th overall for that. And then you've got Guardiola and Saliba. Guardiola 22nd overall, Saliba 38th, and Gabriel 66th. Now, you can look at that and think, oh, well, hang on, let's not look at them, because the fact is that this really, as you mentioned earlier on, the clearances thing really places the emphasis on defenders who need to do a lot of defending. That's kind of what we get interested in here. But the value of clean sheets is still something that is actually really interesting. And each week, if say Liverpool go on one of those runs that they have in the past, you could easily see a Van Dijk kind of netting a 10-pointer week in, week out if they keep the defense quite solid. If he gets a bonus, gets his clean sheet, and gets his defcons, I mean, that could be pretty wild. So don't forget about the premium defenders, even though I think if you look at any of these sort of defcon analyses, you may kind of think, oh, hang on, maybe I should be looking at the 5 million defenders a bit more. They do have a real place, but the premium defenders are premium for a reason still.
Yeah, completely agreed. And yeah, a player like Van Dijk who's locked in 90 minutes every single week in a good defense, but also isn't shy of a clearance every now or then, or it might not technically be a clearance, but it would maybe register as it if he kind of long balls it to one of the wingers as well. So little sneaky things like that might also benefit him over possibly other defenders like a Gabriel. But yeah, they're still going to be FPL relevant. They are elite defenses and they keep a lot of clean sheets. And we shouldn't maybe over egg just how powerful this is. It's a nice booster and a bit of a leveler, but it doesn't make these guys the new template. It brings them up a notch and makes them relevant, but it doesn't make anyone else irrelevant. So yeah, don't over egg it and just start piling in your team with all of these players that are on screen now. Maybe one or two, especially as bench options, really nice. Like an Elliot Anderson, for instance, Caicedo, blah blah blah. But yeah, probably not your captain week in, week out because they now break the game. It's not going to work that way.
Yeah, the essential fabric of the game hasn't changed that much. But as you said, it's just something extra to work into your thinking and how you sort of and how you sort of approach your decision making. But it's not going to be anything which vaults anything. Just as a note, for example, in terms of the forwards, when you look at the CBIRT, only one got over 10 defensive actions per game last year. Who's Ndai, who's now midfielder. The second highest then comes out as being Bowen, who got like a 1% uplift in scores. It's very it's very, very low for forwards. So you really can't be expecting this. Although who knows, if Ekatike comes in and starts becoming Firmino, the second coming, then who knows, we might see it. It might be really cool to have a defensive striker or something like that in the league again. But yeah, I wouldn't be expecting this from strikers at all. But yeah, really interesting. I think I'm all in favour of it.
Yep.
One thing people aren't as much in favour of is well, actually, let's do double chips in a minute. Let's do the assist simplification. Yeah, I think there's lots of different things. If you're watching on YouTube, it's in front of you. But to give the gist of it, Sam, effectively, is that it's cleaned up a lot of this sort of intended destination stuff that we saw a lot of rancor about online last year, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the post they put out made it sound maybe like it was more complicated than it is. And I think people were complaining that, oh, this is going to be a nightmare. It basically just widens the net of what counts as an assist. I think there was something like 40 assists that went unregistered last season that would be effectively overturned this year and being given an assist. So it just basically adds more assists to the game. There will always be those like definitions that maybe like it will still rule something out, but it does simplify it. It opens up more routes to points. It's not going to be a game breaker. It'll be again like 30-40 assists across a season, across 380 games. But it might just mean that like the odd thing that you might have otherwise been hammering your sofa or something after not being given an assist for, you actually now get it. And you can just rest easy knowing that that is going to be given despite a deflection or despite the handball decision. All of this stuff is now much more wide open. There will still be annoyances because it's FPL, but generally speaking, there should be less of them.
Mate, we're going to be sat there counting the clearances and counting the recoveries.
Well,
that was definitely a recovery.
Yeah.
Definitely got a recovery, Anderson. I can't believe it. FPL, here's a video. You definitely got a touch on that. And yeah, I think that this kind of removes, as you said, a little bit of frustration from the player base, which is a good thing. Again, it's a very kind of positive quality of life sort of upgrade. And I think again, it kind of slightly pushes Bruno Fernandes's case, and that's due to shot creating actions. And despite kind of not having the best season in terms of FPL perhaps last year, he was second overall to Palmer for shot creating actions. Palmer, different kettle of fish. I think that he's obviously just a really fantastic footballer, as is Bruno. It's feels very unusual to me, Sam, to be pushing the case of Bruno Fernandes. It's very anti-me.
Yeah, usually this is me. What's happened?
Usually I'm just like, oh God, not Bruno again. But yeah, I think per 90, Bruno was third as well behind Saka and KDB last year for shot creating actions per 90. But yeah, those, I guess, small chances created, the ball kind of put into the area, not really kind of aiming for anyone, that sort of thing, just through being basically quite busy. Those sorts of things where in the past you'd be like, oh, well, there's not going to be an assist there because of intended destination. And now, as you said, they've removed that barrier, and that's really cool. I really like that. And I think that this sort of thing is again, a very positive quality of life update.
Agreed.
So on to the meatier stuff then, Samuel. Double chips. Oh.
Double.
More
Sorry, we
chips
both clicked at the same time
That's
there.
all right.
Yeah, double. We'll do double chips next.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit more debatable. I've seen mixed reactions to this one. I wasn't before the game launched. I wasn't particularly loving it. I have to be honest. I think me and you shared a couple of conversations because we'd heard like rumors that this might be on the bill.
Yeah.
We had nothing confirmed or anything. We've not got like a source, but we heard a few people talking that this might be coming at some point. And we were, I think, generally both kind of hoping that it wasn't, but now it's here. I'm starting to get on board with it a little bit more. And but put it this way, my initial reaction to this was everyone's going to land on the same chip strategy for the first half of the season. However, and therefore it just all becomes very template throughout the entire 38 game weeks, rather than just the second half where there's double game weeks and we all sort of fall into line a little bit, i.e. boring. However, the more I look at it, the more I'm thinking, well, actually, because there's no double game weeks or blanks supposedly in the first half of the season, I think people are going to be a bit more experimental with where they might want to place the chips. There's less of a standout obvious option for any of these uses in the first half of the season, and it kind of forces the hand a little bit. So triple captain, okay, you might say, okay, well, I definitely want to use it on Salah against the promoted side. Well, you've got 3 options there straight away, well, 2 if he goes to AFCON, but you've got multiple options. But even if you didn't use it on him, because it's not a double game week, the difference in what you'd expect out of Salah in a single game week versus what you might or could expect from a Palmer or a Saka or Haaland against a promoted side, all in different game weeks, it might not be that much. And if you're willing to just take a little bit of a punt on a slightly lower expected points player, then you might be able to take an advantage there. So whereas in the second half of the season, everything feels just a little bit more forced into position. It's harder to define a different strategy. I think actually the chips in the first half of the season, you can have a bit more fun with, possibly with the exception of one chip. And I'm sure you can guess which one I'm about to talk about, Tom. But I think 3 of them at least, there's no really blindingly obvious place to play them. So I think that could mean a lot of planning could pay off, and it could mean a lot of fun for FPL managers as well. So I think maybe I'm getting on board with it.
Yeah, I'm fine with it, to be honest. I used to be a bit more of a kind of a purist, want to go back to one wild card, that's it, full on kind of straightforward FPL. But I think as the years wore on, before last year, I would have welcomed anything that shook up a game that was where innovation went to die. It was so stale for an awfully long time. And I agree with you, really, that the key impact is going to be in the first half of the season. Yes, there's more variance, but that variance is limited by the fact there's only going to be double game week if something horrible happens, frankly. So the key impact is going to really be on the first half of the season, right? Because the second half of the season is probably going to proceed as it always has. It's just more whimsical in that first half, and as you said, more experimental. And I'm fine with that. I really am. And yeah, I know the bench boost. People kind of see it as being something, a millstone around your neck, and it's something that if you don't go early doors, which I think is definitely a strategy which many people are considering now. If you don't go over early doors, you're going to have to kind of do a bit more planning on it. But nonetheless, I mean, that's another added dimension of things for us to think about, and lots of stuff for us to kind of factor in, which we didn't have before. So in some ways, yes, it's kind of more fun. People didn't like that phraseology by FPL, but I don't mind it at all. I get it. It's absolutely fine because you can approach it however you want to. You can go bench boost game week 1, free hit game week 2 to get Arsenal players in the wildcard in game week 3. Why not? Do whatever you want to do with it. Or you can kind of take a more sort of considered line with it, calculated line with it. I'm not saying you wouldn't consider it if you did do that, if you'd have your reasons probably. But you can. There's so many different ways you can approach it, and the net kind of damage outside of kind of usual game week variance is probably not going to be that bad. So yeah, I don't mind it at all. Really, yeah, bench boost, Sam. I mean, I know it's one of those bugbears, isn't it? I think last year maybe we were still scarred by that though.
I usually have a pretty good bench boost. Last year was the one that it all came crashing down with. We don't need to go into why that was so bad. But yeah, it can be a challenging one, and because it it basically just requires the most planning. Usually it takes transfers. It usually takes a wild card to get into or out of to make sure your team is sort of balanced afterwards, or you need to book in or save a lot of transfers beforehand to make it all work. However, if you do have the option of 2 bench boosts and you have to use one in the first half of the season, there is that kind of freebie in game week 1 where you can pick whichever 15 you want. It's effectively another wild card. And because, again, you can use a wild card, you can use a free hit afterwards, then you can get straight back out of it if you want to. So it is kind of just a free shot at a bench boost. The problem is that game week 1 has a lot of variance. We're not as secure on who's got the minutes, who is definitely going to start games, what teams are going to be looking strong or weak at the start of the season. There's a lot of question marks. The other problem is if you bench boost game week 1, more often than not, you'll probably need to wildcard fairly quickly afterwards. I'm currently working on a video, hopefully tomorrow, maybe the day after, talking about like a way to maybe bench boost and then not have to wildcard straight away. But even then, it's still pretty soon afterwards. My main worry about wildcarding straight away is you still don't have the amount of information required to make a really well-informed decision on what a wildcard should or could look like. So if you're doing it in game week 2 after bench boosting game week 1, the bench boost might be successful, but then because you've done that, your next 17 game weeks might be a bit more problematic because the wildcard's not been set up perfectly with all the information you might require. So yeah, it's difficult. I think a lot of people are just like auto selecting bench boost, and I don't want to rule it out at all because it might be the play, and it probably is a very good play. But I want to have a way to not need a wild card immediately if I can, because if you do, I think that could bring out its own problems.
Yeah, I mean, that in of itself is a great microcosm for why I'm okay with this, because it just creates that kind of sense of difference, doesn't it? Because on one hand, you could say, right, okay, I'm going to go super aggressive at the start of the year, and the chip strategy setup does make it like I'm going to go super aggressive at the start of the year. If that doesn't pan out for you, and you've burnt 3 chips within the first 3 game weeks, and I haven't, then suddenly there I am, 3 chips up, you know, and then my path goes in a completely different direction to yours, and that's what makes it really fascinating. And that kind of, I suppose, insulates FPL a little bit more against strong templates occurring. I think 5FT last year was them starting to kind of get towards that, and I think this kind of starts to really sort of, I guess it continues to reinforce that a little bit. So yeah, I'm fine with it. I'm also fine with assistant manager dying. Tony in the chat has just said double assistant manager. Whoop, yeah, no, it's gone. It's not happening. So yeah, assistant manager kind of. I didn't dislike it. It was fine. It was like another extra thing to think about. But am I sad it's gone in the dustbin of history along with all out attack? No, I mean it was fun. It was interesting, but I'm not sad to see it gone, really. I'm sure the same for you.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was worth trialing. Like, I get why they were trying to do something different. I didn't love the fact that it was a mystery chip for half the season before we found out what it was. But I think, you know, I like innovation. I like them trying stuff. I'm not sure it was exactly what was needed and maybe a little bit overpowered, but I get the thought behind it. I'm not sad to see it go. I'm happy enough to see the back of it. I don't think it really matters either way. I would have been okay if it stayed, but I'm happy enough to see it gone as well.
Yeah, I think they kind of read the sentiment there that most people, they're obviously kind of going to be very loud voices saying they hate it, but most people kind of like, meh, you know, it's all right. It's very powerful. That's cool, but I don't think it really captured the imagination the way they wanted it to. So yeah, fine. Cool. Something which did also attract a lot of ire is the AFCON 5 FTs, the refresh, retransferred in game week 16. Now, this was a surprise, honestly. I mean, I think DEFCON were like, that's cool, you know, that's great. Assist simplification, fantastic. Double chips. Well, you know, people were like, well, you know, there wasn't kind of the massive undercurrent negativity. This, however, did cause all sorts of a ruckus, didn't it, really? And I don't know, Sam, I've gone full circle on it, but yeah, interesting to see where you've landed first before I say my piece.
I don't think it's as terrible as some people are making out, but I just don't think it's needed like that. Like I can't really picture many managers getting to game week 16 and thinking, oh no, where has this African Cup for Nations come from? I need 5 free transfers immediately. I could have never planned for this. Like, I just don't. I think it takes an element of planning out of the game that benefits the engaged managers, but also even if people got to game week 16, 17 and didn't even realize that this was coming, I don't think it would have been as big a deal as requiring 4 or 5 free transfers to get out of a mess anyway. I think you're probably going to have 2 or 3 players affected at most, maybe 4 or 5 if you're really, really unlucky. But you can probably see that coming a fair few weeks in advance anyway. Salah, put it this way, if Salah wasn't going to AFCON, then this wouldn't exist. I don't think anyone would even have thought about it. I didn't see it coming. I don't think anyone really saw it coming, and I don't think it was particularly needed. But that's not to say that I actively hate it and wish it would leave and never come back. Like, it's there, and it's just something that all of us will now plan for, knowing that effectively we've got a mini wild card in game week 16, or I guess a reset of transfers, so we can kind of spread a wild card out over 4 or 5 weeks if we want to.
Mm-hmm.
Or kind of, again, it brings another tactic into it of like, well, maybe we save a few transfers up to game week 15, use all of those for half the wild card, and then do another mini wild card in game week 16. And then you've got 10 out of 15 brand new players come game week 17. So there's a lot of different ways to play this one. It is a bit of a leveler. I don't love it. I don't think it's that necessary, but we'll plan around it, and I'm sure we can find an advantage to take from it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Was it needed? No. Is it
No.
wanted? Well, yeah, why not? You can give me 5 free transfers. Yeah, sure, I'll take them. I would prefer this to be kind of allowable for only AFCON affected players. And as you said, Sam, I was thinking about this earlier on. Like, if Salah gets injured, then this whole thing is a waste of their time, frankly, because it's all predicated on Salah, effectively, and how much money he costs and what kind of the bigger chunk that they take out. Like, what if Salah has a Haaland? Obviously, we've not seen that over the last kind of 7 or 8, 9 years, so I don't think we'll see it. But we could. What if he kind of shunts into his kind of his twilight years? I don't know. We used to get a wild card in January back in the days of yore. There was use it or lose it. So this is kind of a little bit like that. Nikolai in the chat made me laugh earlier on. They should have called it the Christmas gift transfer, early Christmas present. And that's completely right. I suppose it's just the kind of bright siding it. The way I look into it's another layer of strategy, and although yes, there's been it's a bit of a helping hand to less engaged managers, and that's seemingly the cause of a bit of disgruntlement. People are kind of like, we don't want to be spoon feeding the casuals and all this sort of thing. The other side is still true. Like, engaged manager, everyone gets this, right? So engaged managers also have a lot of extra weapons in our arsenal, and the aspiration should be that we can bring our experience to bear playing FPL and wield that advantage that we get properly in a considered and hopefully successful fashion by planning around this. It's another kind of event to plan in, much like double game weeks and things like that. And it's just another kind of bit that feeds into the FPL planner's wet dream. Like, your sexy spreadsheet this year is going to be like gigabytes because of the amount of possible routes that you can go down, really, with the extra chips. And then there's also this sort of event in the FPL calendar. I can see why people are annoyed, and I completely and utterly agree with what you said. Is the best way to put it. Was this necessary? Absolutely not. But it's here. We're going to take our transfers, and so we're going to kind of plan around it and try to kind of optimize the output of it. And I'm fine with it. I'm no apologist for official FPL, by the way. I'm not employed by them, etc., etc. But yeah, I'm all right with it. It's a surprise. It's not necessary, but it's great for us as planning managers, because hopefully we can kind of make it turn to our advantage. That's all I see it as, really. I can understand when people are a bit annoyed by it. I do think it's something that went a bit too far, though. Bonus changes, probably a bit of a kind of a smaller point, really. The kind of the last thing they kind of pushed out. Not really massive here. There was some goalkeeper saves, pen saves went down a little bit. Goal line clearances, of all things to go kind of searching for in underlying data. Goal line clearances up from 3 BPSs in part of of what makes your BPS score at the end of the game, which then feeds into the bonus points that you get, by the way. I'm not saying you get immediately free BPS for getting a goal line clearance, up to 9, so that they've suddenly become a little bit more important. And tackles 1 now counts rather than 1 versus lost. And penalty goals, which I think is probably the biggest one of these. Now you just get 12 BPS across the board for a penalty goal, rather than a forward getting 24, I think it was, and forward getting 18. I think it's a defender getting 12. So basically,
a bit,
yeah, a little bit of a nerfing really of penalty goals. So it doesn't become like a winner takes it all sort of scenario, you know, where there's someone like a Bumo or something has played terribly all game and then gets penalty in the last minute, and then suddenly there he is walking away with free bonus. So I quite like that. I think that's great. I wish that they kind of gone a little bit further maybe, and maybe taken the points scored down from scoring a penalty to down to kind of a couple of points less for a goal, and maybe added in the winning a penalty as a way to kind of score points, even though that, you know, it doesn't happen. But yeah, overall, again, some nice quality of life changes there for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I agree with the potential for like taking the power off of a penalty, so like a point off or something. But I think that's fine. Like taking the BPS down for, especially for strikers. Chris Wood once or twice last season had 1 shot on goal, scored that shot with a penalty, and got full bonus from that game, even though his team kept a clean sheet. And he did nothing, literally nothing all game, other than just be given a free 0.79 XG chance. So it felt a bit harsh, little bit overpowered on penalty. So I'm glad they've nerfed it slightly. Obviously, it's still relevant. It's still net positive. You get your goal points. You still get a bump in the bonus, but not as big as before. So it's not just a given anymore that these players are going to automatically then get 3 bonus points at the end. So I think, yeah, net good. All for all of these. I think the tackles 1 thing is good as well, rather than just the net outcome of 1 versus lost. I think that's positive because, again, it brings defenders into the mix a little bit more when it comes to the bonus. We've seen it so many times in recent seasons where a defender has had just one of the most standout games all season and then is just nowhere near the bonus because they rank it slightly differently on the bonus points. So I think all of these minor changes probably add up alongside the defensive contributions we talked about earlier to make defenders just slightly more relevant in the bonus points as well, and therefore better FPL assets. So I'm all for the balance, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Basically, yeah, I think the main sort of thing for me is that they're messing with it. They're messing with a system which has been in place for an awfully long time and not had anything done to it. And you know, this sort of wholesale sort of appraisal, which I'm assuming won't end here, of FPL is a very positive thing in my view. I'm very grateful to our Lord and Savior Mark Southerns, basically. I'm assuming this is all his handiwork, and yeah, long may it continue. Because this is brilliant. Again, it's a little bit of quality of life stuff, as with assists, as with the defensive contributions. But I mean, these sorts of things kind of reinfuse older managers like us, and I think kind of there's going to be a little bit of sort of maybe Semmelweis reflex. We'll talk about that with Ross in a couple of weeks about this, where you see something new and think, oh, I just prefer how it was in the old days. Rah, 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 rah. But the reality is that you'll get used to it really quickly. And these sorts of things, I think, will become part of the furniture very, very soon. And they're all good things. I don't see anything about this, apart from maybe a AFCON, which is a bit more contentious, but given the case for why it's a good thing. And there's nothing egregious here that I think, oh, you know what, this is terrible. It's all great. And I'm pretty positive about the whole thing. Anything missing, do you think, overall? I kind of had a couple of thoughts. Deadlines don't seem to have been looked at, as far as we know. Price changes still seem to be opaque unless somebody's spotted something in the wording about that in the help section. Maybe those were 2 that I'd be looking at and thinking, maybe they could have adopted some sort of position on the deadlines. Maybe they could have, made the price changes more sort of like, here is what's going on. I kind of can see why price changes are kind of a source of ongoing conversation throughout the week when there's nothing actually going on in the Premier League. So fine, whatever, drives traffic to the website. Deadlines, I think maybe they could have taken a position on, perhaps, because we're still getting leaks, unfortunately. Do you agree with those? Is there anything else you'd bring up, or just those 2?
I kind of agree with the pricing thing, although I understand why they wouldn't do it, because it adds a layer of mystery to the game and therefore variance. So it means that people can't kind of game the system the entire way, if that makes sense. Although I would personally prefer pricing transparency. I'd sleep a lot better at night knowing that my player definitely isn't going up or down, and therefore I need to make a transfer immediately on limited information. But making moves on limited information is part of the reason that they've constructed it in this way, so that people are logging in on every day rather than just like on a Friday or a Saturday. So I get why they do that, although I prefer it as you said. And then the deadlines, I've thought about this a lot. I just don't think they can change it. I don't think there's any meaningful thing that would fix it at all.
Yeah,
like you can't move it to first kickoff, because then you'll still get leaks for the other kickoffs. You can't move it back to the day before, because then you'll still get leaks. They'll just be less and less high quality, and you'll act on limited information. The same problems will exist no matter where you put the deadline. There's always going to be a demographic somewhere in the world that have to wake up in the middle of the night to get leaks. It's really unfortunate, but like there are players all around the globe, so you can't help that no matter what time you put the deadline at. So I just don't think there's a fix for the deadline stuff. Unless anyone else has any bright ideas, I've got nothing that would actually fix that. So I can understand why they haven't moved it.
Maybe their statement is that they haven't moved it because, as you said, it's like kind of the least worst solution.
I think so. Yeah,
maybe. I've seen like Elite Syrian, for example, is 5 minutes before the first kickoff. Bundesliga is literally at the first kickoff. But neither of those leagues are beset with the same sort of level of chat as the Premier League is. If that level of chat applied to Norwegian football, then we get all sorts of leaks, wouldn't we? Yeah, you're completely right. And I think that maybe it's kind of the least worst solution. I did just have a look at the help section, and it says both the formula used to calculate this change and the time of the change includes variable factors and won't be revealed to FPL managers. So yeah, again, maybe they're kind of they're just doing it for those sorts of reasons. Right. So overall then, overall thoughts on this. Now we've spoken about it, spoken about the pricing and our overall thoughts on that. Warm, and I think you can probably tell that I'm pretty warm on this. Quality of life changes are very positive in my view. It's been a long time coming. Last year they started to do a little bit with the 5 free transfers, and this year I think that in terms of assists, defcons, and the bonus changes, those things have been very, very good in terms of kind of just elevating slightly the player experience. That's great. I'm really on board with that. I think the double chips, slightly more contentious on the contentious scale, where AFCON's at the top and kind of bonus point changes at the bottom. But I think that it kind of leaks into that kind of area of layers of strategy that I'm pretty happy with, and giving us kind of extra things to think about. That's fine, because at the end of the day, it can kind of run the risk of being quite a stale game. And I think giving us more decisions to make is always a good thing. You'll hear, we've pre-recorded it, but you'll hear me, Ross, and Sam speak about how many decisions you have per season. I think that kind of increasing that number of decisions creates more sort of opportunity in FPL. It's certainly more interest in FPL and engagement. And AFCON, I think, probably fits into that same sort of bracket. So basically, I think what it all does is kind of insulates against templates a little bit, which is always a good thing in my view. The worst part of FPL is when everything's blindingly obvious and everybody has the same team, and you're relying on your third defender to do something for you to get a green arrow. That is an awful situation to be in, and I think that this hopefully will mean that that's less likely to happen. And I think overall it just encourages action really a little bit more, which is great. Because you can easily kind of sit there, accumulate your 5 free transfers, which you can still do, but this kind of rewards the other side as well. To some extent, you can be more aggressive at the start of the season, take a chance, take a punt, and see what happens. And I think that's great, honestly. So yeah, having more avenues, having more sort of choice within the confines of this game are all really good things. So yeah, I'm very pleased with what I've seen, really. And I said to you, kind of. Over the weekend, I was very childishly sort of excited about seeing the game change. I'm very enthusiastic about it all, really.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this will be a much more like leaned in season where we're all properly engaged from the start. Obviously, we're engaged managers anyway, so we're always going to be interested and always going to be leaned into a certain extent, but always having those active decisions to make, whether or not it's the time for a free hit, bench boost, wildcard. You have to chip strategy plan immediately, and we're all going to have different strategies. We've already talked about a few different ways you might want to play it, and we will do so over the coming weeks as well. And it's kind of fun going into game week 1 thinking, oh, I need to actually think about my chips season immediately. That's quite interesting. It's quite fun. Cool. So yeah, and as content creators, it gives us so much to talk about too. So yeah, I'm all for it. I think the one that I was most maybe hesitant on is the AFCON 5 transfers, but I think for us that's still a net positive thing as well. So yeah, no problems here whatsoever. I think it's going to be a really interesting season.
Yeah, definitely. So well, I think that kind of rounds off kind of the initial pod in terms of kind of everything we want to talk about today. So the end of the pod, I think we should devote to really, really, really early first drafts, which we can look at after game week 1 has ended and think, oh my goodness, this is 150 points. What have I done? But yeah, we've had the swift look at each other's teams kind of offline. I literally looked at yours about 20 minutes before we came on, so I'm interested to kind of hear your thoughts. But before we kind of go into kind of the detail, I just want to know, because I'm very sort of, as you'll know from kind of our time together, Sam, and obviously kind of if you've listened to this for a long time, I'm kind of like, I will do little bits and pieces throughout the course of most of preseason. It's only in that kind of final week where I really kind of sit there and end up with kind of loads of different drafts. Like I'll try to kind of take an academic interest, I guess, in the whole sort of price structure and the whole sort of game, and have an idea of where everything's sort of going. But you said to me at the start, for example, like, do you know who the most owned player in FPL is right now? I don't, because I haven't looked at that. And
do you want to take a guess at that right now? The fact I'm asking you probably shows it's not like Salah, but go on.
Who was in the? So I know that Salah wasn't in the auto pick, was he?
No.
I'm thinking like a Solanke or a João Pedro or something. Like
second
something
option
like that.
is correct.
Oh really?
Yeah. João Pedro is 55% of teams at the moment.
Is that just because he's in the auto pick? I think he was in the auto pick draft, if I remember correctly.
He could be, but he's being picked by a lot of people as well that I've seen. A lot of people.
All right. But yeah, I mean, I take quite a chill sort of approach to drafting until we have all of the information. So like, friendlies and stuff, I don't really care about that. Like, if someone tells me that a player got subbed off 58 minutes in the first friendly, or that means he's a minute's risk, I don't believe that. But you know, towards the end of kind of preseason, we've got loads of information. I will then kind of synthesize that into actually thinking about this a bit more. But yeah, I mean, you're fairly similar to me, aren't you? I mean, you're not the kind of guy who's going to be sitting there kind of messing around with the draft every single day, are you?
Not so much from like a personal point of view, but like as a YouTuber as well, I do make quite a lot of content, so I need to have a mess around with different structures, I suppose. But
yeah,
absolutely. the way that I try and map that out is I don't really take ownership of those drafts necessarily, other than like the ones that I say, this is my first draft or this is my latest draft. A lot of them would be like, this is what I would do if I wanted Haaland up front, and this is the structure I might go for, or this is how I'd have Salah and Wirtz, and that kind of thing. So I won't really take too much ownership of those, but I do find it helpful, like mapping out those different structures just so I've got them fresh in my mind, and it almost gives me like a bit of a stress test on my current draft, in the sense that like, oh, okay, I quite like how that's shaping up, but what don't I like about that specific draft that I do like about mine, or is it actually in some ways better than mine? Can I get more out of it this way? So it just means that I'm doing like the research I probably need to get to my final draft at the end. So I'm going to have a lot of tinkering, but not necessarily on my own specific draft to begin with. And then, once I've kind of like stress test a few different styles, obviously I said I'm going to do like a bench boost video and like all that sort of stuff. I'll see what fits best for what I like, and probably just end up on that. But yeah, I'm going to be pretty chilled. I'll probably sit on this draft for my own team for a little while.
Yeah.
And then about a week or two out, I'll maybe start like trying to refine it a little bit more.
Absolutely. No, I'm pretty much same as you, but I'll like it'll be an event if I make a change in my draft. If that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
I'll have like a mental idea of kind of where I am as I begin to kind of. I said to you kind of a little while ago that kind of this afternoon hasn't been so much about kind of making copious notes for this pod. It's been about sort of reconnecting with the game a little bit, and I'll have like an idea of kind of what I think I like, the setup that I like, which is kind of going to be reflected in a minute. But I won't be making kind of loads of superfluous changes throughout the course of the pre-thingy season. So I mean, there's a question in the chat right now about, you know, why no love for this player, why no interest in this player. We simply haven't got there yet. We've still got 25 days, and I think that kind of the last kind of pod of preseason, that's when we kind of start to really look at kind of individual players, individual A versus Bs. This is when we kind of
Exactly.
You know, we're just at the very beginning of that. Oh, I hate saying this, but at the beginning of that journey right now. But yeah, anyway, let's go into your draft, Sam. And you know, I like the look of it. I think we've got quite a few players in common. I'm going to say that, was that 5, 6? No, 5, 6 in common. So yes, that's quite a lot of difference actually, considering where we normally start off. But who knows? We're going to end up with the same team, aren't we? Except one player come game week 1, but hopefully not. And yeah, I looked at it for 20 minutes, not for 20 minutes, but I looked at it before we started 20 minutes, and I think it's really interesting kind of setups. Yeah, talk us through it.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, made a quick video on it earlier if anyone wants to check that out. I think it's still the same draft. Sells in goal at 5 million for now. I like Nottingham Forest's fixtures from a defensive point of view to begin the season, so I wanted some coverage there. Ideally, you'd have a Murillo or a Milenkovic because of the defcon benefit, but Stells actually isn't that far off of them, even with that conversion in points from last season, and he's 0.5 cheaper. So I'm happy enough with him for now. I've got Kinski as my bench goalkeeper. Apparently he's kind of fighting with Vicario for that number 1 spot at the moment, so seems as good as any. Defense, I've gone one proper premium at 6 million. That's Ait Nuri at present. I would say he's the biggest minutes risk I've got in my, well, probably my 13, including my first and second bench. But I'm fairly confident he'll get good minutes. That could end up just being Gvardiol just for security by the time we get there. But 6 million Man City defender at the moment. Good defensive fixtures. Munoz, not the best fixtures defensively to begin with, but not only is he an absolute beast from an attacking point of view, he's also for a wing back very strong on the defcon as well. So go check that out. Do a bit of research if you can. He actually gets a significant bump for a fullback, for a wing back on the defcon, and it would have taken him to a very competitive score last season. So I really like the look of him still at 5.5 million. I think that's good value. Wan-Bissaka and Konza rotate really nicely for the first 12 game weeks, both at 4.5. I think that's good value for money on both of them. And then Heaven is my defender. That's any 4.0. Heaven's being rated by some Man United fans. It might end up being Goodmanson at Leeds, who's being touted a little bit as well.
Stoop mentioned him, didn't he, in the Leeds chat? I mean, fair enough. If he's going to play every game at 4.0 on the bench, that's kind of all you need, isn't it?
Yeah, that kind of level of research will come, but that I will keep my ear to the ground on that kind of stuff. That's not a finalized position. Midfield, Salah, obvious. Palmer is my other sort of premium over 10 million. Rodgers and Ndiaye start in my midfield 4, and Elliot Anderson will be a constant first bench for me. Now, a quick word on Elliot Anderson as a constant first bench. The points last season, if you add in DEFCON, we've already talked about, rocket up to about 150. So very, very strong. That is great across the season. But he only got 8 attacking returns. That's 1 in every 5-ish games. He does play every game. But he's not a player that I would be confident actively wanting to start even in the good fixtures, because he will drip feed points more often than not. It'll be 4, 4, 5, 2, 8, 2, 5, and it'll grind on like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But with other players, the ones that I'm starting with, you can maybe just slightly more predict when the explosions are going to come, and therefore they over time are slightly more effective FPL assets. Elliot Anderson as a bench option, or Caicedo, any of those sort of DM players, are perfect for a drip feed, because it means that if any of your players in your front 7 get injured for 1 week or suspended, you've got 4 or 5 points coming off your bench, and a hit is almost never worth it. So he's like the perfect first bench option for me right now. And Dye on penalties, 90 minutes, great, 6.5. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Rodgers, I've got 0.5 in the bank to upgrade Rodgers to maybe Eze, but I really like Villa's opening few fixtures, and he's nailed for minutes. I also expect him to like tick upwards in terms of the underlying data this year. I think he's improving as a player. Same goes for Elliot Anderson. Up front, 3 players, all between 7 and 7.5 million. And I think you're really struggling to find any striker other than Strand Larson or Welbeck under that are really that decent. Wissa, Solanke, Evan Nilsson, love all 3. Wissa's going to be the one that I think people are going to scoff at a little bit. Evan Nilsson and Solanke, I think, are going to be quite popular. I still think Wissa's going to tick over very nicely. He got 18 goals last season and matched that in terms of XG. Didn't have penalties. Will probably have penalties this year.
If he's at Brentford.
Obviously he's not going to, I'm not going to pick him if he's not at Brentford. Let's not be silly here. So he's there if he's at Brentford. He's going to be.
I had to mention it. Someone's listening.
I think
goes Newcastle, mate.
Yeah. Well, I bet in my early draft I put Bowen as a midfielder. So yeah, that one's ruled out. But I do have 0.5 in the bank. So if Wissa left, that could be Bowen. Yep. Equally, Rodgers could be Eze, or Munoz could be a Frimpong or a Gabriel or whatever. That 0.5 is going to get used, but I haven't decided where it's most effectively used yet.
No, I think it was really good. I think it's it's all very well reasoned. Honestly, I don't really kind of. It's too early, isn't it, for me to be saying, "Oh, have you considered this? Have you considered that?" And
no,
I don't want to be pushing you towards like kind of where I've landed after an hour's work. I don't know, that's kind of going to be a very kind of silly thing for me to be doing. I mean, this is a completely viable start of the season draft. Honestly, if the season started tomorrow, I'd be perfectly happy if that's where I landed. I do think that Palmer, Salah, Rodgers, that's the 3 that I've got as well. I've got a 5-man midfield we'll go on to in a minute. But I feel like when I first sat down, Sam, this evening and actually put my first proper draft together, like those 3 were just like in. Like obviously Salah above and beyond. Palmer.
Rodgers was really obvious to you in that case?
He was okay. Actually. Cool. I don't know. I just kind of felt like for the price, for the minutes on offer, and the start of the season isn't like incredible, but it's good enough. And at that price, with the fact that we know he's going to be playing an awful lot of minutes for Villa, I think that's one of those things that kind of it's very difficult to ignore, isn't it? Really, especially early doors when there's fewer sort of bits around. I think it was kind of in the 30s, something like that for XGI last year. I need to check. I don't think it was kind of terrible or anything like that. But yeah,
it was like 0.35, 0.3, up to 0.4 XGI per 90.
It's the expected minutes. It's the expected minutes as well, isn't it? For that price within a team which is going to be challenging for top 4, top 5. That's great. I'm not going to be saying no to that. So 7 million, fine. I mean, I'm actually a bit surprised I didn't put him any higher, but hey, there we go. As for me, very early days, as we mentioned. Goalkeepers, I've not looked into it yet at all, honestly. Areola is currently in there for saves. I've got 4.5 million for my goalkeeper as it stands. I probably like him, Wan-Bissaka, or whatever. Like I could get one of them. It feels like there's going to be a lot of people kind of. My kind of game brain's already engaged. I'm kind of like, well, people are probably going to have one of these players, and we're like West Ham defender, so maybe it'll be one of those. And old Tits McGee, fine, whatever. Just throw him in. He does get saves, and goalkeepers get 3 points for a save potentially now if it's inside the box. So yeah, he could be all right for the odd bonus or two. Premium defenders. Guardiola, as mentioned earlier on briefly, I think he'll do well in the defcons. So fine, could be him, could be like Nori. I just think that at the start of the year, I just want those expected minutes in a player like Guardiola. And if he's playing centre back in FPL 1.0, I'd be like, oh well, I prefer Nori. In this kind of new world, yeah, I'm fine with Guardiola. I'm very happy with Guardiola, in fact. Neco Williams, I've got a 5.0 compared to you with Sells. I mean, obviously that could be the other way around,
right.
where I go with Sells in goal, and I could go with Wan-Bissaka. Williams actually does better than Milenkovic and Aina in terms of the per game defcons. Using my methodology from earlier. And I think that's actually quite appealing, actually, considering he's on some set pieces as well. So, yeah, early thoughts, maybe him as quite a good option. I've got O'Brien in on that sort of gamification side of it. Like, it's peanuts between him and Mikalenko. I've got nothing in the bank, so I've got a 5.0 for a defender here. And I feel like, I don't know, Sam, I feel like we're going to probably need an Everton defender at the beginning, given how much hype they've had from FPL Towers. And don't quote me on that. I'm sure I haven't looked at the the ownership data. I may be completely and utterly wrong. But my kind of feeling is that people are going to be defaulting to eventually the highest scoring goalkeeper in Pickford. Don't know if people are going to be buying into Tarkovsky and stuff because they're coming at 5.5. But fair, whatever. On the bench for defenders, I've got Anderson, who's very good for C-bit, and Gehi. So I've gone 3-5-2. The third striker is going to be Junk, so it's Ashley Barnes for sentimental reasons. But it's going to be they're going to be two 4.5 million defenders. They're going to have to be centre backs. They're going to be ones that I'm going to trust to play every single week. Anderson and Gehi kind of fit the bill really as being kind of decent for C-bit, like just 90-minute men. Could come off the bench with a 4-pointer. I've got no kind of trust in Fulham nor Palace to keep clean sheets every week. But hey, if there's a chance for 4-pointer, I'll take it. One of them could be De Cooper. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
how
I'm interested in him as well.
So Estepinian's move to Milan has been confirmed this evening as we've been podding. So yes. The heir to Barco could well come into our sides. If
Barco hadn't have happened, he'd probably already be in my Game Week 1 side right now. I'm burnt.
Yeah,
and it shouldn't affect it, but it does a bit, doesn't it? You want that guarantee.
Yeah, but I think with Stupinan leaving, I think that maybe we're more interested. But Hinchelwood has played there, etc. So who knows? I've got Anderson in there at the moment as a sit and play in the five midfield. So him, Guehi, and Anderson. If we were starting Game Week 1 tomorrow, the idea would be that kind of whoever would show up, Anderson or Guehi, which would play. I like what you're saying about bench one, though, for a player like Anderson. Belabor at 5 to play that role probably would be my pick if I was going that way. A similar Siebert, an XGI last year. So I probably would go that way with an Anderson. And I've got Bruno as well. They're both just kind of DEFCON kings, aren't they, really? I think that Bruno's going to be an amazing asset this year. And I feel like they're both kind of great draft picks and potentially really good FPL ones too. Bruno, because of Penn's general busyness, the assist rule changing, the DEFCON stuff. I think that he could easily, Arsenal first. Okay, you look at that and you think, oh, God, that's terrible. But 4 points versus Arsenal for Bruno, who says no? I think that's perfectly viable. And then after that, am I worried about him, really? I don't know United at all. I'm sure most of you know. But Fulham, Burnley in the first 3, and a bit more difficult fixtures against Man City and Chelsea in 4 and 5. I think that he could be one of those players that just love and leave, but like Eden Hazard back in the day, just leave him there. If it doesn't go well, Florian versus is 8.5. So I can get that. There's loads of different ways I can escape from Bruno. In my view, Salah, Rodgers, and Palmer's pick themselves right now. And up front, I've got Bowen and Slanky. I just really like. I said to you over the summer when we met up, actually, that one of my bold claims for this year is going to be that Slanky's the top scoring striker for 7.5. It has to be bold. But I think that Frank's got such a great history of improving forward players, and Slanky had better XG per 90 than Chris Wood last year, best non-pen XGI than Chris Wood and Cole Palmer last year. One of his players, there's scope for him to improve at Spurs. Now he's been there for a year, in the building for a year, and I just think that's with the Burnley game week 1. It kind of, I'm not saying it's complete no-brainer territory, but I think he's approaching it, honestly. And Bowen, I can be persuaded off him. Honestly, I obviously threw them in because of the Sunderland game first, but they got Chelsea, Forest, Spurs, and Palace, and then Everton and Arsenal. So it's not the best start to the season, honestly. That could well change. And that extra money could well mean that I end up with, a Tarkowski or a Bramthwaite or something like that. There are loads of different ways you could pull at the threads, Sam, and to be like, oh, if I do that, I do this. But I will probably save that exercise until much later on. Although, who knows? Over the course of next week, when I'm prepping for the price pod, it may be that I look at it and just be like, oh, God, Bowen's rubbish. What am I doing here? This is useless. I get in my team, João Pedro. Do that. I don't mind João Pedro at all. I know there's a lot of people who have a bit of a hangover from last year with him, but I don't mind him at all. But yeah, that's
memories with him. Yeah, I just don't think he'll get the minutes. Well, or at least I'm not confident he'll get the minutes. Who
knows at Chelsea, honestly. Ashley Barnes, as I said, the first striker for now, but I don't know. I quite like 3-5-2 or 4-4-2 really at the start of the year. I feel like a lot of the value now in FPL and is going to be in midfield and in defence a little bit. So yeah, that's the first thoughts for me anyway.
Yep, I like it, and you've got a lot of very secure picks in there. Great on the X minutes, lots of penalties, lots of defcon covered too. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that as well. I think there's going to be so many drafts that I look at in the next 2 weeks where I'm like, yeah, love that as well. Arguably better than mine, and that's actually quite nice. It's quite refreshing that I think this season more than maybe the last few, there are just so many different ways to structure a draft that actually would look really logical and really sensible. So yeah, I think they've priced it well. They've made it competitive and they've given people something to think about, and that can only be a positive thing. So yeah, all for it. Really, really positive first draft from you there, Tom. I'm pretty happy with mine, but there are players in yours that I want already, and hopefully vice versa. So yeah, lots of thinking to be done yet. Very early days.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we've got, was it 4 more pods before the game week starts? So one next week after. Is it the 15th of August? 22nd. It's 15th, isn't it?
15th, yeah.
It starts. So yeah, 4 pods to go in pre-season. We've got the pricing pod next week. We'll do a little bit of work on, probably some home brews and things like that. We've got a pod already in the can with FPL Raptor on psychological challenges faced by FPL managers. Brilliant, already recorded. That'll be out in a couple of weeks. And then there's the final pre-season pod. So yeah, that's the pre-season stuff from us. Very short and sweet. Did have a pod and analytics lined up. I think we'll keep that one back for the international break, just because we can't quite fit it in here. But yeah, I mean, I think just very positive and very excited, really, going into the start of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to be back. It's it feels like an exciting FPL season ahead of us with all those changes, and I feel like there's a good energy about it this season. Everyone seems really excited to get going. It's priced well. Lots of debate to be had over the next couple of weeks. Really interesting. So, as always, thank you all so much for listening. We have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist. Is that correct, Tom? It's all one word. Who got the assist? I changed it to Who Got the Assist. Cool. But yeah, that just looked new to me. I was like, I don't usually say that at the end. Anyway, so Who Got the Assist? All one word. Brand new tag on Blue Sky. FPL Pricey on there for me. On X, it's WGTA_FPL or FPL Pricey for me. On YouTube, it's WGTA_FPL. And I've got FPL Pricey over there. I think I've done 7 videos so far for this season already, and I'll be doing a lot more yet to come, treating it almost as like a second full-time job for myself this year. So hopefully you enjoy it, and if you enjoyed the pods, please do one or all, preferably all, of the following. Give us a follow on those social channels, give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening, Spotify, iTunes, wherever, and of course, finally, if you could leave a like and hit subscribe on YouTube, that would be incredibly appreciated. We'd be very grateful. As Paul said, let's give these lads some likes. Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you all in advance for doing so.
Yeah, thanks very much for listening, especially if you're new. We really hope you enjoyed it and you'll keep coming back for the course of the year. This is kind of what we do. Slightly longer form than some stuff out there, but we hope you enjoy it as much as we do making it. Thanks so much, Sam, as always, for coming back for the 3rd year. I don't have to get a new co-host yet, which is good. We'll be back next Tuesday, our usual slot, Tuesday, 8:45. We hope we assist you start to think about FPL again. Thanks all. Great to be back, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got got the assist? Who got the assist?